Welcome back to SBW Talks, where we have real and honest conversations for women by women. In our last episode, we spoke with Toni Plante about the heartbreaking loss of her daughter Anna. Today, Toni joins us again to share more about her journey through grief, how she's navigating life after such a profound loss, on where she is now, emotionally and spiritually. Welcome, Toni.
Hi, Neela. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, thank you again for being here. This is such a deeply important conversation about healing, resilience, and finding light in the darkest of times. What have been some of the things, whether people, practices, or moments that have helped you get through the hardest of days?
Well, I think so. When Anna died, of course, grief is it's really such a hard thing, and we really are bad at grief in this country, probably in this world. I don't know, but I know for certain the United States is not good at it. We don't know how to deal with it. We like to not talk about it. We think people will be through it in just a minute. We think it's going to be this stage, this stage, this stage, and I'm here to tell you that it's not going to be like that. Grief, really, you think it's going to go through all the stages of grief, and really it goes here and here and here and back and forth and all over the place. And you can see that in some graphics that are popular in the grief circles. And in reality, you're not going to get through it. It's always going to be there. Some people like to think you get through grief and you end up like moving on from it. And I really like to think that the grief starts little and you are little. And as the grief stays little, you get bigger and the grief stays the same size. So you grow around the grief doesn't shrink inside of you. And I really believe that's true after having gone through it and constantly read things about it and that kind of thing. That was one of the first things I did after she died, is I just really had to try to figure out how it happened and what it was she was, what go through somebody's brain to do something like that. And so I read everything I could get my hands on, and I listened to everything I could get my hands on, and I talked to everybody that I could talk to about it. And I was really open about it because I think I might have mentioned before that we think suicide is like, somebody's fault, or maybe the parents did something wrong, or what happened to make her do that kind of thing. And I learned really early on in that that's not the case. That the case is that there was just something that Anna couldn't get through. She couldn't get past it in her brain. When she thought about living, the pain was too deep and she couldn't live anymore. So I really believe that's the case, that she had that broken brain I talked about last time, and that she couldn't live anymore. It wasn't my fault. She wasn't doing it to hurt me, and that now we just needed to figure out a way to get through the pain that we've been left with. But grief is all-encompassing. It now is like a part of your life. You get to this, when something like this happens, it's like, now it's been determined. There was before and there is an after. And that's how my life will always be. It's like I had the time before Anna died and I have the time after Anna died. And they're two completely different things. I go with it. She comes with it too, because she will always be a part of me. And the fact that she's gone from the earth doesn't mean that she's gone from me. So I like to look at it that way. One of the best things that I did was try to go to, I talk about it to anyone. I think I'm lucky because I was brought up in a house where my mom would say I remember walking around, she had little stickies on the walls, ask for what I want, which was just a weird thing to think back then, but she was a teacher. And she just thought that was important, to ask for what you want, which I think is a good woman thing anyway.
Right.
We need to learn to ask for what we want. And so I just really took that. And when I needed something, like I knew right after Anna died that Friday nights would be hard for me, because she and I would go to Target on Friday nights, or we'd have pizza or whatever we do. And I knew that would be hard for me to sit home by myself on Friday nights. So I asked, that someone always try to call me or find me on Friday nights. And my family did. I mean, I'm very lucky because my siblings were really all about it. They would come over, they would help me, and so that was very helpful. Just learning to ask for what you want, or if you need some time alone, right now I don't want to be with this. Right now I need to be by myself, or right now I'm really panicking. I need to be with people, or right now I just need to listen to music, or, to just kind of know yourself and have some, I don't know, some, what's the word I'm looking for? Some skills in the closet, waiting for when you have something really bad happen to you. So it's like, if I didn't have anything available to me, I wouldn't have had anything to pull from.
No, and I think what you had was great because I think you figured yourself out first. Like, what do I
Yes.
need to heal?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of reasons for that because I've been through a lot of other kind of traumatic stuff in my life. Nothing as bad as this, but certainly had. And so I'd figured it out a few times before. And I think that resilience and that tenacity kind of got me through. Even, I wouldn't say easier, but, it made things a little bit easier for me to grasp anyway. And then as time went on, I tried a couple of different grief groups because what ends up happening is you get to a point where you're not done talking about it. Because, it's been 9 years and I still like to talk about it. And so you're not done, but a lot of the people in your life are done talking about it. They're like, aren't you done with that yet? Aren't you moving on from that? And you're like, no, I'm never going to move on. So, but at least if you find another group of people that are in grief and grieving, you can talk about it together. And I really have learned over the years that I really like grievers. It's a weird thing to say, but I really do. And
I
so
think grief is an emotion that never goes away.
no, it sure does not. It really doesn't, but you learn to live with it. And
Right.
you have a few choices after you've been through the big grief, whatever it might be. You have a few choices. You can let it encompass you and be sad your whole life, or you can take it and let it help change you and build something in your life.
Right.
And one of the books that I read a few years in was called Finding Meaning, The Sixth Stage of Grief.
Okay.
And I think that is it just talks about how we can make meaning out of the person's life that we lost. And if you look around my room behind me here, I see I have a smiley face pillow. And my daughter loved smiley face everywhere. So we simply get a lot of smiley face things. I also have a little smiley face thing on my desk. I have them everywhere. And then I have a tattoo.
Wow.
I got that almost right away after she died. She loved the semicolon, and I don't know if your people are familiar with that, but the semicolon project talks about instead of putting a period at an end of a sentence, you put a semicolon, which implies that you're going to pause instead of stop. So you're going to pause and take a breath instead of end your life when something happens. And so what I put on here was Anna, her name, and then a semicolon, which reminds me every day that her story isn't over.
Right.
The semicolon talks about how my story isn't over yet and her story isn't over. And then I recently got, hang on one sec. I got, we had somebody made them at her funeral and then we had new ones made. And they
Oh,
say,
wow.
her story will never be over with a
Right.
semicolon and a smiley face.
That's amazing.
So those are some of the things that we do to try to continue her kind of legacy to, keep her alive in the way that we try to keep with mental health awareness and that kind of thing. So,
And it's okay not to forget. I think a lot of people try to push it in the back of their mind. And I think what's positive in this is you're actually remembering her and bringing your emotions up in the
all the
front.
time. Like, I think my friends get sick of it. So it's like, sorry, on the day she died and the day of her birthday, you're going to hear about it and probably a whole bunch of other times too. But for sure, those 2 days you're going to hear about it because, those are the days where we make it a point to remember her.
Right.
So, but those two things have been really important to me, or those things have been really important to me in keeping her alive. The other thing that I did was, like I mentioned, found some grief groups. And I went to one that was called Grief Share, and that was sort of religiously based. It was through my church. but it was good. It was all kinds of different loss. So there was others that had lost, like one was a husband, one, and it was all different kinds of losses. But it was good and interesting. I would say it was, I recommend it. I mean, and when people ask for other stuff, I always recommend it because I thought it was good. Then I went to a group that was sort of, I don't know how I heard about it. Somebody sent me their name. It was all parents, mothers actually, who had lost children. And they did not have a suicide loss, but it was any kind of loss. So there was some cancer, there was some. That was also kind of helpful, although I really felt like when I would say she died by suicide, I'd get this look. They just didn't know what to say, And so I really kept thinking, and I really needed more. I needed somebody who kind of got the suicide part of it. So then I found this organization called Survivor Resources, and they are located here in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I started going to that group, and I never stopped. So as soon as I got that letter in the mail, I've been going ever since. And these people all had a suicide loss. And the people there, it's a non-denominational. So it's not religious at all. It's not politically oriented. It is just like, I'd say more of like that AA kind of model where it's like we help each other. And people just get it. And everybody always says something that I can relate to. And everybody, always says something to add or some way to help.
It's like the connection is helping you heal.
Oh, so much. There's no comparison to being with people that get it. It's just incredible. So I started going there, like I said, and then eventually, like a few years later, I started facilitating these groups because they have volunteers as facilitators. And then 3 years ago, I started working for Survivor Resources. We also do support groups for people who have lost loved ones to homicide, accidental death, and overdose. So it's all the traumatic loss stuff that we do. And I find it really helpful for me to continue to do that on a daily basis, to be able to help and give back. Giving back to me has been more important than anything. It's like if I can get out of bed in the morning and know that I'm going to maybe answer the phone to someone who's struggling with the loss of someone, it makes all the difference in the world. And then I said too that, I really, I like to have fun too. Don't get me wrong. But on the other hand, I just really like being around grievers. And I do have like a really quick poem I'd briefly like to just read quick.
Yeah, sure.
Because I didn't write it, but it explains why I like to continue to go to grief group, even though, it's been a long time for me. And it goes, if you ever get the chance to love a person who knows grief, do not let them go. You see, the thing about grief is that it's not exclusive. It consumes life. It taints everything a little gray. It won't hesitate to remind you that everyone and everything you love will disappear someday. But I've found that the people who carry grief love with a fierceness that no one else knows. They understand what's at stake because they had to let someone go. So they remember the little things, and they show up when it counts. They know that life is rare, and you won't have to spell it out for them. So don't take for granted the people who know loss, for they know more about love because they know what it costs.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Isn't that sweet? It was by a really young author named Whitney Hansen. I don't know her. I just found it one time, but it kind of encompasses how I feel. It's like it's a weird thing to say, but I like people who know grief because
you connect with them and relate with them.
We go straight to what really matters instead of just talking about nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think you've been through a lot. I mean, grief is such a personal and non-linear experience, and I think you got that.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's like, I don't know, if there's one thing that I've gained from Anna's death, it's that I feel like I've gotten more compassion. I don't know, but like back before she died, it would be like if somebody died, I would think, should I go to that funeral? Maybe they'll think it's weird I'm at that funeral. Maybe I didn't know them well enough. Maybe I this or that. But now I know. Go to the funeral. They're not going to be sad. They're not going to think that you're weird for being there. They're going to be grateful that you're there.
What you just said is so profound.
Mm-hmm.
Like, go there go to the funeral and be a support system.
Yep. And you don't have to say much. There's really nothing you can say when someone someone died and they really loved them and it was, really traumatic and horrible for them. I mean, all you can really say is, I'm sorry, and I wish there was a better word than sorry.
Right.
It's really all you can do. And so if you can just go there and be, and they'll see you, they'll know. Anna's funeral was a little different. She was young. She had, lots of people in the community knew all of us for different reasons. My husband was a coach and all different things, but hers was a little big. I still sometimes can't remember who all was there, to be honest. But most of the time, most funerals that you go to, they're going to remember that you're there.
Wow.
So I think it matters.
It does matter. What's something someone said or did for you during this time that made a lasting impact?
So the first day when we got home from the hospital, we had like a house full of people. And the hard thing about that is that not everybody would want that, but we did. So that was, people asked us, is it okay if more people come over? And we were just like, yeah, we don't care, And then, of course, they brought stuff. We had so many nice people do things and not tell us who they were. So that was always really nice. Like they would send, I got like a bracelet one time in the mail. It was like, what was that? And I have no idea what it was, like a custom made bracelet with some Anna stuff on it, and like a t-shirt, a suicide prevention t-shirt from somebody that still never told me who they were. And just people are so nice that I would think if there's, just anything you can do, to just keep doing it, because that first week, 2 weeks, month, that's when it gets lonely afterwards.
Right.
After that first month, you're just sitting there by yourself. So if you can possibly send a gift card there then for a dinner or something, you know what I mean? That would probably be a great idea to do it later on. We're still thinking about you. Hope you're doing okay, whatever. I also knew of a woman once who had a friend who lost their husband. And instead of asking, what do you want? They just did. And I think that's really key too, because if you say,
Yes.
how can I help you? They're going to say, I don't know. And so this person instead said, I'm going to come over on Friday with pizza and we're going to watch TV. And they did that every Friday. And they didn't give them a choice and they didn't ask them what they wanted. That's just what they did.
And that's something, I think that's so important. Rather than saying, what can I do for you? Just go ahead and do it. And I think the individual will appreciate it.
Right. I agree. And I've really learned that. And it's like even, whatever you can give, it comes back to you in so many ways. Even if something, even if you just bring them a gift card or, so they can order their own dinner, whatever. But anything you can do like that is super helpful. And like I said, on an ongoing basis, if you know when the anniversary date is of their person, send them a text. Doesn't have to be any big deal.
And I think, Toni, your relationship with yourself has changed since Anna's passing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, because nothing matters, And I know I've said this before, but, it's like when something really bad happens, like whatever it might be, I just say, you know what? I've had worse days. This is not my worst day. There's no way.
No. And I think the healing started from you the day maybe she passed away.
Well, I had to, yeah.
That's the hardest part.
Yeah, that was the worst. It's like you're so numb at first because grief is like super physical too. So it's not just like you're sad all the time. It's like your brain, really, grief brain is really a thing. I mean, it's a thing. You think people say I have grief brain, but it really is a thing. You can't remember stuff. You don't know where you're supposed to be. You don't know what day it is. You just have to be really careful. Somebody told me once, one of the most important things to do at the very beginning of your grief is make sure you just take care of those basic needs. Just like write yourself a note. I'm going to get up, at a reasonable hour. I'm going to get out of bed because that's key. I got to totally get out of bed, like I always say. And then you have to make sure you eat. Make sure you're eating relatively healthily. Make sure you're drinking enough water. Make sure you get outside for 5 minutes, if nothing else. Go get the mail or something. and make sure you get some amount of exercise, whether it's walking around the block or not. But those are like the basic things in life. I always tell people you're healing up, through this grief is going to be easier if you make sure you get those basic things done.
And I don't think you can really understand grief until you lose someone. You know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
you cannot explain that grief until someone passes away in your life.
Mm-hmm.
No words can ever state what you're feeling.
Yeah. Absolutely. And grief is going to, if you don't think it's a big deal that you lost somebody, I don't believe that, because if you we are going to carry it with us forever, and if you don't face it, it will stay and wait for you. And I've seen it happen so many times. We just had somebody come to our group, our suicide loss group, 20 years ago. They lost their person, and they're just now saying, you know what, I just think I've never dealt with it.
Right.
So it's going to wait for you, whether or not you do it now or later.
And I think grief is such a deep emotion. We don't really discuss it. We talk about happiness, sadness, fear, but grief is another emotion that is really rarely discussed.
Right, absolutely, because people think it's got an end to it.
It's
You
not.
just, you go through it and there you are. Well, you know what? No, that's not how it works.
And it's probably one of those emotions that is never ending until the day you pass away.
Yeah,
Because
I think you're right.
it will always be in our memory, that emotion of grief of who we lost, who we loved.
Right. And what happens is you learn to live with it. So, like, you're not just laying on the floor, not able to move after a certain point, because you realize you have to get up and go to work.
Right.
So then you take, you do the things you need to do, which is go to a therapist if that's what you need to do. You go to a group also, or you talk to people about it, you read about it, all those things. And then you have some amount of wherewithal to take your grief and kind of set it aside for a while and get out of the house and go to work. I mean, it's the only
Right.
way you do. You have to set it aside. It's going to be waiting for you when you get home, but you have to learn to do that. And grief is just as much a learning process as it is a living process, because you have to learn to live again, because
And
now
grief
you're,
could be like any emotion, like crying or silence, or
Yep.
it could be any type.
Anger is a big one. You get a lot of anger. I get a lot of anger in my group about grief. I'm mad at them that they killed themselves. I'm mad at them that that this was done to me, that they were taken away from me. I'm mad at them that I have to live by myself now. All kinds of different things. So anger is a big one.
It's a mixture of emotions
Yep.
that you
It
go
sure
through in
is.
grief.
There's a little saying, a little grief saying that says, I sat with my anger long enough until she told me her real name was grief.
Wow. Very nice.
Yep, I like that one too.
You know that movie that came out, Inside Out? Is that the one with emotions?
Yeah,
They should have one on grief.
they really should. But I agree. Grief, it would be a great thing. There's more movies and stuff on grief now than there used to be. I can't remember the name of the most recent one I saw, or not most recent, but it was the one with Dan Levy, the guy from Schitt's Creek.
Okay.
And it was pretty well done. I mean, they're doing a little bit more with it now, I think, which is good. I'm glad to see it.
What is one advice for other mothers or other families who might be walking on a similar path? What words of comfort or wisdom would you want to share with them?
It's not your fault. I mean, that's just the biggest thing, because that's the hardest thing. And you think why it's a parent that lost a child, particularly to suicide, but maybe it was an overdose, maybe, who knows what it was, but let's say it was a suicide or an overdose, and all you can think of is, why couldn't I save them? They were my kid. I should have known. Why couldn't I save them? Because as a mother, that's what we do.
Right.
We're taking care of our kids. So when that doesn't work and they end up taking their own life, you think it's entirely your fault. But as we know and we learn as we go through this passage of grief and loss and suicide learning and all that stuff, that it's not your fault. There's
No.
a whole bunch of shoulda, woulda, couldas that you can go through over and over. and you never get anywhere with them because it's just not true.
And I think, as you said, it's not our fault, and we don't need to analyze that.
Right, right. It's hard to do though because your brain knows that's true, but your heart says it still feels like my fault. You know what I
Right.
mean? So it's something you have to get through, and I had to hear it about 500,000 times, and hear it from a lot of different people that, you know what, it's not your fault, and you can get past that because it's not your fault.
No.
And you think about things like it could have happened the next day, or it could have, all kinds of different things because I'm sorry if I repeat things from last time because I'm constantly telling the same stories over and over, but it's because they really like resonate with me. Something there what I remember, but it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. Did I ever tell you that story?
No, no.
Not okay. So we had a game when I was younger. It's not around anymore. This is what I thought about with Anna. I always thought about it. It's like, okay, so you take a straw every time something happens, and it's like, okay, she was bullied. Okay, she was adopted. Felt like she was different. Okay, so she had a learning disability. That was hard. So this happened to her that day. And all these straws are going on the camel's back. And then that day, I had an argument with her. And that was it. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. And so it's not one thing. It's never one thing.
And it's something you can't control.
No, not at all. I mean, the only way I could have controlled it that day is to not go on a walk. But obviously I didn't know that, or I wouldn't have gone on a walk. So
No.
if we had known then what we know now, we would have all changed the outcome. So,
Right.
yeah.
No, thank you, Toni. You've been incredibly open in sharing this story, how you've connected with so many people. What's one last advice you would give to people?
Well, I gotta say, it's really, you gotta reach out, ask for what you need, and you really need to reach out. I just think anybody who's lost somebody to suicide in particular, or, well, any of the traumatic death. So maybe even it's cancer, but if it was a 10-year-old, that's horrifying. Even if it was any kid that died out of order, it's horrible. And I just really believe that a therapist of some kind, or it doesn't matter as much what the person's, I read this somewhere, what the therapist's title is doesn't matter as much as your relationship with the therapist. So if the therapist is a counselor or a social worker or a grief coach, that would even be fine. Any of those things are fine. It's just a matter of how well you relate to them and how you can get on with them. So I recommend both a counselor and a grief group.
Okay. No, thank you, Toni. You've been excellent. I thank you again for coming to us and talking to us about Anna, about you, what you've been through, grief, again, an emotion that no one really discusses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you, Toni. Again, thank you
Thanks
for
for
coming
letting me
again.
get the word out and carry Anna's story. I
No.
really appreciate it.
Hopefully you'll come back again. Again, thank you to all our listeners again for listening and viewing and sharing our story with Toni. Hope to see you soon. Please remember to subscribe, follow, and share. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.